Welcome back to Real Vision. I'm your host, Ash Bennington. Today, I'm joined by Michael Howell, founder and managing director of GL Indexes. Michael, great to have you back with us on Real Vision.
Hi, Ash, always a pleasure. Plenty going on in markets. Is it going to be a summer panic? We always question that one.
Well, Michael, it's great to have you with us. I know many of our viewers are familiar with your work, and are sure are eager to hear from you today. But for those who are not familiar with your work, who may be joining us for the first time, tell us a little bit about what you do and your view of the world and markets.
Okay, let me kick off by saying that our lens is liquidity. That's been our focus for probably 3 decades now. Our view is that money moves markets. Economics is downstream of markets, and geopolitics is downstream of economics. So basically, it all begins with the liquidity cycle, and that's what we put most emphasis on. We track liquidity flows through financial markets, and I stress that difference between liquidity in the financial economy and liquidity in generally in the real economy. They're two very, very different things. So we're looking fundamentally at liquidity in the financial markets, that flow that's driving asset markets, and we basically collect data intensively from about 90 financial systems worldwide. Clearly, some of those are less important than others, but we pretty much cover the waterfront. And we're looking at granular data, so we collect about 30 data series per country. And we've just basically launched in the last 9 months a system where we can do that on a much more granular basis. In fact, high frequency daily data. So there's a lot of numbers that go into these calculations.
Mike, I've been following your work for years since I've been at Real Vision. You do a very granular job of going through that data. You've got some decks prepared for us today, some charts for us to look at. Let's jump in and take a look.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the first slide is probably the sort of centerpiece of what we do, which is looking at the global liquidity cycle. You can see what's going on, maybe visually here. The black line is a measure of the momentum, and I stress the momentum, not the level, but the momentum of liquidity, which is traveling through world financial markets. Again, this is not a money supply measure like an M2. This is basically liquidity in the financial sector, which is very different. This is showing the underlying rate of change of that series. You can see that the data series goes all the way back to the 1960s. The red line that you can see on top of that is a sine wave that we've put on top. That was estimated, for those that are familiar with mathematical techniques, by Fourier analysis back about 25 years ago. So in year 2000, we did the calculations. We haven't changed those, and we've just basically just rolled on the same cycle. That is a 65-month cycle, and it seems to be more or less tracking the liquidity cycle as is. Independently, a group called the Foundation for the Study of Cycles in the US asked to look at our data. We gave it to them. They're sort of they're very thorough analysts for cycles. They put it through their algorithms and actually came up with exactly the same frequency, a 65-month cycle. So that's reassuring. They certainly know what they're doing when it comes to cycle analysis. And what you can see is the cycle basically flipping and flopping. It bottomed in late 2022, around September, October of that year. It peaked in Q4 of last year. Momentum has been slowing ever since. I mean, I stress the fact this is the rate of change, it's not the level, but you can see the inflection. It's that inflection which really informs our asset allocation. So what I can do is just give maybe a glimpse of that to look at what we really mean. This is looking at the notional asset allocation cycle. This is how we basically define our investment stance. We begin, if you look at the left-hand side of that diagram, with the equity markets. So in other words, equities do very well when you've got liquidity conditions very, very strong. In other words, when you've got a lot of momentum in the upswing of the cycle. Commodity markets tend to do best around the peak of the cycle. I mean, that's clearly where we've been for much of the last 12, 15 months. And then as the cycle starts to inflect and lose momentum, you start to find that cash instruments tend to do better. And that's a call not just on the return, that's also on the volatility background. So as you start to see liquidity flipping over, not only do returns on risk assets fall, but actually the underlying volatility of those instruments picks up. So the quality of return deteriorates. And then by the time we get to the trough of that cycle, you tend to find that bond markets Conventional government bonds, longer duration government bonds, that is, tend to do very well. They're the better performers. And you can see as well, we've sort of embroidered the chart by looking at what the yield curve, which is denoted YC, is doing at different phases: bear steepening, bear flattening, bull flattening, bull steepening, etc., and what different industry groups are doing as well in red. One of the things to note, that if you look at the cycle where we are right now, which is what we would deem to be the speculation phase of the cycle, you would typically find strong performance from commodities. You'd also be seeing a bear flattening of the yield curve. And both those two factors are definitely coming out. The other thing that's worth pointing out, which is shown on this other slide, which is sort of putting this in context, comparing the liquidity cycle in red with the economic cycle in yellow there, is that, as I said right at the beginning, the liquidity cycle is a sort of foundation. It leads most things, particularly the real economy. The real economy tends to lag about 15 months, maybe 18 months after the liquidity cycle peaks and troughs. And you can see there that where we are now, which is around that area that is denoted by that red blob, that red blob signifies that that's a yield curve, prospective yield curve turning point. It occurs as you sort of move over into the downwards phase of the liquidity cycle. But that is the phase, as you will see there, when economies are accelerating. So the third factor to watch is not just strong commodities, not just yield curves inflecting, but also economic momentum beginning to pick up. So we're trying to fingerprint the markets by looking at a range of indicators, starting from liquidity, but also broadening out to understand that transmission.
So this is just an excellent setup for the way, the framework you use, how you think about the world. Mike, whenever you come on the show, I do my homework ahead of time. I was reading some research that you guys put out last night. I saw this headline, which obviously got my attention. GFC2 is likely by 2030. That is a quite striking headline when you see it in a chart deck. Give us a little bit of a sense of where we are right now in your view with regard to the liquidity cycle, with regard to the economic cycle, and with regard to where you see markets heading next.
Okay, that's a good segue into maybe trying to understand what the pressure points in markets are. So let me just spin on to that part of the presentation, which is a little bit further on. Maybe the best thing to do is to start with this slide. This is looking at the structure of global liquidity. So you can see there the broad numbers. So global liquidity is a pool of funds, 190 trillion. That means it's about 1.75 bigger than the world economy itself. And that sits on what we think of as a shadow monetary base. And that monetary base is consisting of not only central bank money, so in other words, Fed liquidity, it's also sitting on collateral, which you've got to accept are probably dominated increasingly, certainly in financial trades, by US treasuries. So it's that collateral and central bank money pool, which is, if you like, the base of the inverted pyramid. And that's what constitutes the bulk of the shadow monetary base. Now, one of the things I think to differentiate maybe the world and maybe what we're saying is, if you go back pre-GFC, the sort of cri de coeur in markets, or the analysis of what went wrong in the GFC, was that there was generally a lack of safe assets. Now, there's some truth in that. In other words, there were insufficient treasuries or good quality bonds in financial systems to act as cushions. That may or may not have been true. But what we're looking at now is a situation where it's not so much the pool of collateral that is important, it's actually the collateral multiplier. In other words, how effectively that collateral can be used, and whether there is the balance sheet capacity in the system to basically move that collateral into make it into credit, and, if you like, sort of make it usable within the financial sector. So it's really a question of looking at the efficiency or the efficacy with which collateral is used. That's a really important thing, and that's why I do that thing which is called the ratio there, which is the collateral multiplier between that shadow monetary base and global liquidity. That ratio tends to change, and I'll come on to explaining a bit later why it changes and why we've got to look in certain maybe different rabbit holes. Now, if you come to this chart, which again is a schematic, but it maybe helps the education of what's going on, is this is the modern financial system. And this is how the system has evolved, certainly since the GFC. What you have at the heart of the system is a debt liquidity nexus. And that basically says that liquidity requires debt and debt requires liquidity. And that is really the anchor of financial stability. In other words, what you need is stability between the amount of debt and the amount of liquidity. So let's call it a stable debt liquidity ratio. Now, why does debt need liquidity? Debt needs liquidity for refinancing. And the reason for that is that the bulk of transactions, something like three quarters, maybe more, of all transactions, primary transactions in global financial markets, are debt refinancing transactions. So the key point here is that the amount of new money raising, ostensibly for capex or whatever new funds are used for, this doesn't really happen anymore. Financial markets in the West are mature. They're not raising new money for capex. What they're principally doing is rolling over existing debt, and there is a lot of debt, as you would agree, and that debt is issued with a finite term, and it needs to be rolled over or refinanced periodically, probably with a maturity of or average maturity of about 5 or 6 years. So you get this continual debt roll. Now, the other thing is that liquidity needs debt because, as we argued in the previous slide, liquidity needs collateral. It's collateralized lending. The repo markets are really central to funding. And you need, paradoxically, liquidity needs, paradoxically, good quality debt to sit upon. So you simply can't default debt because that would just wreck the whole credit system. So what you've got to do is to basically nurture debt and make sure the debt markets, the collateral markets, are stable. So this debt liquidity nexus is key. If you cannot essentially turn debt into liquidity, you get a problem in the repo collateral markets on the left. And you can see that in terms of the move or the move index of bond volatility or SOFR spreads, which are the measure of market rates on repo versus what the Fed is signaling through either Fed funds or interest rate on overnight reserve balances. Something like 77%, or accurately 77%, because the World Bank figure of all global lending now is collateral backed. That includes real estate deals, but it also predominantly also includes US Treasuries or German bonds as collateral for lending. So if you see that leg breaking down, you'll get the move index or the SOFR move index spiking or SOFR spread spiking. On the other side, if you get a problem on refinancing, you can't essentially refinance debt. Where you're going to get problems, you're going to get problems in term premia. Term premia will start to collapse, or you start to see credit spreads beginning to blow out. So those are the things to watch. Now, this is the ratio, and this is my long-winded answer to your question. And this is basically saying, look, here is the ratio of debt to liquidity across the advanced economies. And if you use this particular lens, I think it explains an awful lot about what's going on in terms of markets. And it also would explain, if we have time to go on to this, what's going on in China right now. And what this is basically illustrating is that when the debt liquidity ratio gets too high, you'll start to see tensions, refinancing tensions, and policymakers will come in and they'll start throwing liquidity at the system, okay? And they'll try and stave off a financial crisis, but you'll notice that financial crises tend to occur around the peaks in that ratio. So this is all about the debt liquidity ratio spinning out of control. On the downside, if there is too much liquidity relative to debt, what is the vent? The vent is asset bubbles. And you can see those examples that I've illustrated. We've just come through what, I loosely call the everything bubble. Maybe that's the correct, label for it. But you'll see that after that everything bubble, the orange line, which is shown as projection for the next 4 or 5 years, basically goes from the bottom of the chart towards the top and crosses the threshold at 200%. And that is the danger area we're moving into. It may not be hit in 2026, but clearly on this extrapolation, we're getting up there in the next 4 to 5 years. And that's when you start to get problems. In other words, refinancing problems. Now, what are the two issues that we're facing? Number one is something we've already touched on, but liquidity tends to be cyclical, whereas debt growth is exponential. And that is not a happy marriage, because if you start to see liquidity turning down, as we're seeing now, you're going to get more and more pressure for refinancing in the markets. And that maybe is what we're seeing. But the other problem that exists goes back to the COVID crisis. And that is best illustrated here with something called the debt maturity wall. Now, one of the things that policymakers came up with during the COVID time was the brilliant tongue-in-cheek comment or cynical comment of zero interest rates. Now, zero interest rates may well have fulfilled a short-term policy imperative, but the problem is that what it does is it incentivizes debt. And not only incentivizes the take-up of debt, but it also encourages existing borrowers to term out their debt, refinance it, and basically put it out maybe 5 years into the future. And that's what happened during the COVID period. And if you look at this chart, the orange bars are the actual data points annually for showing the change in the amount of debt that needs to be refinanced every year. Now, what you'll see during those COVID years is because the debt was termed out, it wasn't refinanced, it was issued as new debt, and it basically is coming back into the system in the later part of the 2020s, shown by that red area. So what you see here is a debt maturity wall which is facing us. In other words, there are many, many more, debts to roll over in coming years. And let me stress, this is coming on top of all the new debt that may be issued for government spending, the big deficit. It's coming on top of the AI issuance, etc. These are big numbers. So the strain on financial markets is beginning to tell. And that means we've got to start monitoring very closely what is happening in the repo collateral markets, which we can turn to next.
And this is mechanistic. This is just a consequence of the term of the debt. This is not a market-driven spike that you see. This is literally just the internal debt dynamics and the necessity of this maturity yield.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Yeah, I mean, this is just an echo effect, if you like, of the COVID crisis coming back.
Before you go, that was just the preview. The full conversation goes much deeper. What's really driving markets, where the risks are, and how the best investors are positioning. That's what we do at Real Vision. We connect the dots before they become obvious. So don't stop here. Watch the full episode now and more on Real Vision.